Alright, let's just get this out there. If you wandered in here hoping for some chill, soothing bedtime history, you're in luck. Sort of. Welcome to the not so sparkly, occasionally super creepy saga of Egypt's pharaohs. And hey, before we go full Tomb Raider, I'm honestly curious. Where are you listening from? Is it 2 a.m. and you're doom scrolling? Or are you pretending this is research, work? Drop a comment, wave, whatever. Also, if you're into this kind of history, but weirdly relaxing, you might want to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time I spiral into ancient weirdness. Picture this, endless gold sands, the Nile, glinting like some kind of ancient Instagram filter, and these absolutely bonkers temples stabbing up into the sky. We're talking about a civilization that somehow lasted longer than most people's attention spans over 3,000 years. And right smack in the middle, the pharaohs. These folks weren't just kings and queens, they actually thought they were gods, or at least wanted everyone else to buy it. But here's the kicker. Behind all the bling and those dramatic headdresses, pharaoh life was honestly kind of dark. Think obsessions, paranoia, and stuff you probably wouldn't want on your Tinder bio, like, human sacrifice. Over the next hour or however long you last before sleep or deep existential crisis, we'll poke around their palaces, crash a few royal family feuds, and peek into their weird god complexes. We'll also get real about their death obsession. Imagine being so freaked out about the afterlife that you build a pyramid just for your corpse and maybe drag a few unlucky servants along for the ride. You'll meet some absolute icons along the way. Hatshepsut Queen, boss, probably better at eyeliner than you. Akhenaten the Og religious disruptor, King Tut, yeah, that dude, and Ramses II the flexor of all flexors. And we'll dig through the lingering mysteries that still have archaeologists in a frenzy, Indiana Jones style. So, dim your lights, cozy up, and let's get a little lost in ancient Egypt's drama. But hang on, before we get too deep into mummy territory, let's zoom out and scope the whole scene. Egypt at its peak, wild. We're talking 3100 BC to 30 BC. King Menes or Narmer, depending on which old school text you read, basically herded a bunch of Nile Valley tribes together and kicked off one of history's most insane glow-ups. They rode that fertile river valley all the way to the top, inventing stuff like the ox-drawn plow and sailboats. So, yeah, you can thank them next time you're stuck in traffic. Egypt ballooned into this powerhouse, stretching from the Med to Nubia. Think big. Pharaohs ran the show with a bureaucracy that'd make your city council look like a group project gone wrong. They invented hieroglyphs, fancy, right? Nailed the 365-day calendar, and built some of the most jaw-dropping monuments ever. The pyramids, still flexing thousands of years later. But all that stone and glory? It was about more than just look at me. These rulers were obsessed, like, truly obsessed with what happened after death. Building pyramids wasn't just architectural ego. It was a desperate bid for immortality, a way to make sure they'd be living it up in the afterlife while everyone else just rotted away. To the core of all this madness, the pharaohs themselves, living gods or so they claimed, supreme rulers in everything, government, religion, war. Basically, imagine being your own boss, head priest, and commander-in-chief all at once. Wild, right? But plot twist, being divine came with a whole mess of rules and, honestly, horrors. We're talking about arranged marriages with your own siblings, gross, but for the bloodline, dragging your pets and servants into the afterlife, yikes, and the occasional live sacrifice to keep the gods happy. So, buckle up. The lives of these so-called god kings swung from dazzling to downright disturbing. Ready? Let's ditch the sanitized textbook version and get a little messy with history's most legendary and possibly most dysfunctional rulers. Egypt's waiting, and trust me, it's way weirder than you remember from school. Alright, picture this. It's like 1500 BCE, peak New Kingdom vibes. The sun's barely up, casting that soft glow over the limestone walls of the pharaoh's palace in Thebes, which, by the way, is straight up massive. Think palace complex, not humble abode. The king's waking up, not to some janky alarm clock, but to blind musicians playing a sunrise soundtrack. Not bad, right? Servants? Oh, they're already hustling, bare feet, torches, trays stacked with breakfast treats. Out in the courtyard, you've got gardens lush enough to make any modern influencer jealous, fountains bubbling, birds flitting, and because why not, tame baboons and lion cubs just chilling in the shade. The pharaoh rolls out looking like a literal god, because that's the whole point. He's got a whole squad of body servants dedicated just to making him look flawless. They've shaved him smooth lace, not on their watch, painted his eyes with coal and green malachite, slathered him in the fanciest oils and perfumes money can buy. Gold everywhere, electrum catching the sunrise, and this falcon-shaped crown perched on his head, shouting to everyone, "Hey, I'm basically Horus on Earth, dressed to kill." Our guy heads out to tackle his to-do list, which is intense. First up, the palace shrine. He's got to keep the gods happy. Re, Osiris, his own divine ancestors, the whole squad. Priests are chanting, incense is thick in the air, and the king's down on the floor doing his best humble servant of the gods act. Gotta keep up appearances. God's appeased for the moment. He gathers his council. Picture a golden throne. The vizier, reading off a list of headaches, border drama, trade deals, construction projects. Sure, he asks for advice, but let's be real. The pharaoh's word is law. Everybody else, just there for decoration. The rest of the day, it's a blur. Non-stop ceremonies, public parades, the kind of spectacle that makes people believe he's got one foot in the afterlife already. He's out there in a chariot, crowd going wild, tossing gold and grain like it's an Oprah giveaway. Opening temples, smashing the first stake in with a golden mallet, priests chanting pure drama. But under all that swagger, there's this constant anxiety. Dude's superstitious. He always enters rooms right foot first. Evil spirits are apparently everywhere. Eats with only his left hand, keeps the right one for God business. And whatever you do, don't let his shadow touch a priest or a statue. Could bring down curses or worse. Bad PR. Sun starts sinking. Pharaoh finally gets a breather. Back to his private quarters for a quick reset before the nightly feast. Banquet. Time is wild. Dancers grooving, harps twanging, the king sipping date wine like a boss, getting deep into theology with his advisors. But even here, death's always lurking in the background. For the pharaoh, this life, no matter how epic, is just the pre-game for eternity in the field of reeds. That's why he's already blowing fortunes on his tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Gotta flex in the afterlife too. And hey, as if running a kingdom isn't stressful enough, there's family drama, Game of Thrones style, but with more eyeliner. The top priority? Make a male heir. Except, the royal family tree's more like a tangled bush, marrying siblings, cousins, sometimes their own kids, just to keep that bloodline pure. Meanwhile, the great royal wife, who might also be his half-sister, yikes, is scheming to get her son ahead of his older half-brother. The palace is basically a reality show. Plotting, backstabbing, power grabs, history's full of wild stories. Hatshepsut, who took the throne herself and ruled like a king, beard and all, while her stepson waited in the wings. Or Akhenaten, the original religious disruptor, who tossed out centuries of tradition just because he felt like it. Egyptian royalty, never boring. So, picture this, Akhenaten, in a wild fit of religious obsession, just straight up ditches all the old gods and declares the sun disk, the Aten, the only one worth worshipping. Dude's so committed, he even changes his own name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, packs up and hauls the whole royal court out to some random spot in the desert, and basically gives the priests of Amun the boot. Unsurprisingly, this whole experiment blows up in his face. Conspiracies everywhere. The kingdom's a mess, and when he finally bows out, it's his poor kid Tutankhamun who's left to sweep up the shards. But honestly, if you want to talk about the really messed up side of pharaoh power, let's get into human sacrifice. Yeah, that was a thing. Archaeologists have dug up tombs from Egypt's early dynasties where they found retainer sacrifices, dozens of servants basically murdered to keep serving their king in the afterlife. Wild. Some pharaohs, like Jur, just took it to the next level, buried with their pets, bling, and weirdly, piles of human hair wigs probably snipped off the poor souls who got sacrificed. Thankfully, people eventually realized this was, horrific. And by the end of the Old Kingdom, they'd swapped out actual murder for more symbolic stuff, like little statues. Still, kind of leaves a nasty smudge on the otherwise shiny legend of the pharaohs, if nothing else, a reminder of how utterly untouchable these rulers were compared to the crowds they bossed around. Fast forward a few centuries, and the pharaohs just keep cranking out drama. Ramses II, that's Ramses the Great, turns Egypt into the world's flexing capital, building temples plastered with his victories and love stories. Cleopatra? She's out here playing 4D chess with Rome, making history and memes at the same time. But honestly, nobody has snatched pop culture's attention quite like Tutankhamun, the boy king who died young but managed to become a global superstar when his tomb, basically a glitter bomb of gold, was cracked open in 1922. That golden mask, iconic. All those stacked coffins and thrones, just a peek into the wild opulence of royal burials. These days, with all our fancy tech court scans, DNA tests, the whole CSI, ancient Egypt thing, we're learning even more. Turns out Tut's family tree was a genetic train wreck, and the poor kid probably got taken out by malaria and some nasty infected injuries at 19. Meanwhile, the old hieroglyphs and papyri are spilling tea about palace life, foreign mistresses, scheming viziers. Game of Thrones level power plays nothing new under the sun, right? Still, with all the skeletons tumbling out of those tombs, you can't deny the pharaohs' legacy. For over 3 millennia, they ruled a civilization that literally changed the world. Pyramids built with mind-boggling math, ancient doctors poking around inside skulls, artists and architects churning out stuff that still drops jaws today. Nefertiti's bust, pure elegance. The Colossi of Memnon, straight up a dash inspiring. So next time you're staring at the Sphinx's inscrutable mug or gawking at Tut's golden death mask, just remember these pharaohs weren't just dusty old rulers. They were larger than life, sometimes terrifying, always fascinating. Their story is all about ambition, excess, and the never-ending chase for immortality. And honestly, can you blame us for still being obsessed? Man, ancient Egypt is just wild, like straight-up Game of Thrones levels of drama, but with more gold and sand. You've got these jaw-dropping victories and then, boom, some really dark, brutal stuff lurking right behind the shiny monuments. The pharaohs built stuff so big you'd think they were compensating for something. Come on, 80-foot statues. And they chased immortality like they were allergic to the whole being mortal thing. It's equal parts inspiring and horrifying. Honestly, the way they clung to power and tried to cheat death, yeah, that never goes out of style, does it? And the whole saga? It just keeps sucking people in. Those ancient stones aren't giving up their secrets anytime soon, and every generation comes along thinking, hey, maybe I'll be the one to figure this out. Spoiler, probably not, but it's fun to try. Anyway, that's a wrap on this roller coaster through the glitz and gore of the pharaohs. Hope you dug this deep dive into the Og drama kings and queens. Seriously, these folks make modern celebrities look tame. If this peek into the weird, wild world of Egypt left you with something to chew on as you crash for the night, then I'm calling it a win. Thank you for hanging out with me here on Boring History, which is, honestly, anything but boring, if you ask me. If you're into this kind of ride through the dusty corners of the past, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And drop your hot takes on the pharaohs below. I want to hear 'em. Alright, signing off. May your dreams be packed with sunlight glinting off the Nile, endless green reeds, and maybe a whisper or two from those long-gone kings and queens who thought they could outsmart death. Good night, you legends. But let's be real for a second. The lives of these Egyptian rulers? Total excess, bling, power, gods on speed dial, stuff we can barely imagine now. But it wasn't all gold masks and pretty tombs. Behind the curtain, it was an absolute mess, unchecked egos, obsessions with magic, and death always lurking in the corner. Ramses II? That dude took it to another level. 66 years on the throne, talk about a workaholic, building enough temples to make your head spin, and let's not even get into the whole erasing his enemies from history flex. If Ramses could replace your face with his, he would and did. Guy had over 100 kids, a harem that would make a rock star blush, and he basically turned his afterlife into a full-blown production. His tomb? Not just a fancy grave, but a whole city built to serve him in the next world. He even had his pet lion mummified, which is both adorable and a little terrifying. And then there's the darker bit. Evidence says some of his staff and concubines were, invited to join him in the afterlife. Yikes. Talk about a boss who doesn't know when to quit. Ramses wasn't the only one with a god complex either. Other pharaohs, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, Cleopatra, same script, different cast. They rewrote religious rules, took whatever and whoever they wanted, and if you got in the way, well, tough luck. For them, being divine meant never having to say sorry. But here's the kicker. For all their power trips and magical insurance policies, they still wound up dead like everyone else. All those treasures and tombs? Just fancy wrappers for a pretty basic human truth: nobody gets out alive. The pharaohs might have ruled as living gods, but in the end, they met the same fate as the folks sweating in their fields. Dust to dust, you know. Honestly, even though their empire crumbled and nobody remembers their gods anymore except maybe in a museum gift shop, you gotta admit the wild saga of the pharaohs still hits home. You'd think, after all these centuries, modern wannabe tyrants and self-proclaimed demigods might take a hint. But nope, plenty of folks still strut around like they're untouchable, as if karma's on vacation. They should really take a look at how those ancient Egyptian big shots ended up. Spoiler: not great. Death doesn't care if you own half the Nile or just a patch of dirt, it's coming for everyone, king or commoner. It's a reality check that's been echoing for like 3 millennia. Closing the book on these god kings, it's hard not to get lost in all the stuff swallowed up by the sands. Sure, we dug up their bling and pieced together some of their secrets with a lot of wild guessing, let's be honest, but there's still a universe of mystery about these people who built wonders and tossed morality out the window whenever it suited them. Maybe as archaeologists keep poking around in the dust, we'll get a clearer picture, like, what exactly made these dudes tick? What drove them to build pyramids and act like literal gods on Earth, while also being utterly self-absorbed? For now, the pharaohs just keep haunting us, half lion, half gold, all mystery. Who knows what else is lurking in the Valley of the Kings, just waiting for some poor grad student to brush it off and spark a new Netflix docuseries. Tales of tyrants get ground down to sand eventually, sure, but they don't ever really disappear. If anything, their stories stick around as a giant, glittering warning that no matter how high you climb, time's still gonna knock you down a peg or 1,000. So, tonight, if you're lying in bed picturing golden coffins and ghostly whispers, just remember, these ancient royals basically held all the cheat codes: life, death, heaven, earth, all right there in their jewel-encrusted hands. Maybe it's a good thing we don't have folks like that anymore. Divine, decadent, and totally wrecked by their own egos. Honestly, good riddance. Anyway, let's talk about a regular pharaoh morning. The guy would start his day not with coffee, but with a holy bath, sometimes dunked by priests, just to make sure the divine bio was kept in check. Clean slate, inside and out. Then, it's time to get dressed, only the fanciest linens, loaded up with bling like the double crown, crook, and flail. Nothing was random. That crook shouted, "I'm your shepherd," and the flail basically screamed, "I'll smack my enemies." Even tossing on a robe was a spiritual event. Every step, every twitch, choreographed to keep the universe from falling apart. Screw up the ritual, and supposedly, the gods would flip out. No pressure, right? Decked out and purified, the pharaoh would strut out of the palace, ready to tackle his insane to-do list. First stop, the temple. He'd make offerings, say magic words, wave incense around, all to keep the gods happy and Egypt rolling. He had to nail every move, every chant. Imagine if your morning routine could tank an entire civilization. Talk about stress. The pyramid text sun tomb walls, basically a cheat sheet for surviving the afterlife, because even dead, the pharaoh had standards to meet. Can't say I envy the guy. Man, imagine the stress having to pull off these sacred rituals perfectly, with basically the fate of the universe riding on your every move. No pressure, right? Once all the chanting and incense was over, the pharaoh had to get down to actual ruling. He'd huddle up with his inner circle, those viziers who were basically his eyes and ears all over Egypt. They'd roll in with updates: who's happy, who's plotting, what's up with the Nubians, or if the Hittites were itching for trouble again. People would come to the pharaoh with their problems, and he'd dole out judgments, supposedly all according to Mott justice, cosmic order, the works. Sure, the viziers ran the day-to-day chaos of that gigantic bureaucracy, but don't get it twisted, the pharaoh was the final boss. His word was law, and everyone knew it. Thing is, when one person has that much unchecked power, bad stuff happens. Some pharaohs couldn't resist going full dictator, jacking up taxes, forcing people to haul stones for their latest mega temple, or just straight up purging anyone they didn't trust. Take Thutmose IV, for example. This dude had his own mother and brother killed, just to keep a grip on the throne. Family dinners must have been awkward, if they even had them, but hey, it wasn't all doom and gloom. Pharaohs got to live it up too. Picture him tearing across the desert in a chariot, loosing arrows at terrified lions and gazelles. It wasn't just for fun, the hunt was a power move, proof he could keep chaos at bay. Or maybe he'd unwind with a game of Senate, which was basically the Og board game of Egypt. It wasn't just about killing time. Some folks thought Senate mirrored your soul's journey through the underworld. Leave it to the Egyptians to turn everything, even game night, into a cosmic drama. As the sun dipped and the shadows stretched out, the pharaoh would finally crash in his royal quarters. But even sleep wasn't just sleep for this guy. They believed his soul mingled with the sun god at night, recharging his divine batteries. That meant wild dreams, sometimes actual messages from the gods. Priests would pore over dream journals to decode them. There's this one creepy dream from Ramses II, where the god Ptah showed up, sword in hand, and told him off for slacking on temple construction. Ramses woke up shook and got those workers moving. Seriously, not even your dreams were safe if you were pharaoh. The line between normal life and cosmic business just didn't exist for these guys. Even their beds were covered in protective spells, just in case something nasty tried to slip in while they were out cold. The whole day was this tightrope walk between being a god and just a regular, if insanely powerful person. Every move mattered, every decision was loaded with meaning, and they knew it. Some pharaohs managed to keep it together, balancing justice with all that absolute authority, making life better for their people. Others, not so much. The power warped them, and their legacies got stained with cruelty and paranoia. But whether they were remembered as legends or monsters, one thing's for sure: being pharaoh was nothing like modern leadership. Every day started at sunrise with the priests, a ritual bath, and that big, showy march to the main temple. The pharaoh wasn't just ruling, he was the bridge between his people and the gods, with the weight of the world and the afterlife on his shoulders. Exhausting, right? Makes you wonder why anyone would want the job. Alright, here's the rewrite, with some real human flair. Honestly, the guy's main job was to keep cosmic order and all that in check. Every morning, he'd strut in, probably a little too proud, and hand out tiny statues of himself, like party favors. Then came the fancy drinks, wine, milk, whatever was pricey, and he'd pour them out for the gods. Incense everywhere, prayers flying around, and a whole lot of chanting. Seriously, it was a full-on magical sing-along. Once the morning show was over, the pharaoh had to get down to actual work. He'd listen to his ministers ramble on, settle squabbles, some probably dumber than others, and sign off on decrees, irrigation, mining, you name it. And he wasn't done yet. As the day dragged on, he'd jump into more rituals, think blessing crops or showing off at festivals. Oh, and if there was a chance to slap his name on a new pyramid or temple, you bet he was all over that. Busy dude, really.